Fallout continues to trickle in after this past week's testimony given by former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Lawmakers say the goal is to clarify the extent of the Clintons' past interactions with Epstein and determine whether any inconsistencies remain in public accounts. Both Clintons have long denied knowledge of Epstein's criminal conduct and also repeated their claims after they testified. Let's dive deeper into this with the legal ramifications of all that went down with noted defense attorney and former Fulton County Assistant DA Daryl Cohen. Daryl, always good to have you up with us this morning. So when you listen to both Clintons and what they had to say, what stands out, not necessarily politically, but legally here?
Legally, we need to know, want to know, should know, were the Clintons involved in any way? Now, their testimony, as I understand it, and as their previous stance is, no, we knew him. Bill Clinton flew on his plane, but that didn't mean that Bill Clinton was part of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. It didn't mean that Bill Clinton was anything other than a business associate, as so many people have been over the years.
You know, we often hear defense attorneys tell their clients not to say anything. Is there any legal risk in speaking publicly after testifying before Congress?
There's always a risk. The risk is, do I or do I not? Now, oftentimes I tell my clients, KYD BMS. What does that stand for? Keep your damn big mouth shut. On the other hand, I say to my clients, if you have nothing to hide, then you hide nothing. And Jonathan, we know that regardless of what the testimony is and the depositions, there are going to be those that say, yeah, this is absolutely correct. He's cool. She's cool. Others will say, this is a lie, it's terrible. So the court of public opinion really has to decide whether or not they are guilty. And I'm not speaking on a legal criminal side, but guilty of associating with a known pedophile, with a known horrible human being. But did they know he was that bad person? That is such a question, and no one will ever know.
Yeah, and that's kind of at the heart of the case. Hillary Clinton, in fact, framed it around not knowing Epstein's conduct. Why is that such a key legal issue right here?
Well, it's not necessarily a legal issue so much as it is a social issue. There are those that want to punish the Clintons because they exist. There are those that want to exonerate the Clintons because they exist. So what we need are those people in the middle that look at the facts and the evidence or the lack of evidence and say, wait a minute, she was all the way up here and she didn't know, or she was the Secretary of State, she should have known, but didn't know. And some of us, most of us actually, don't get into the weeds unless and until we need to. Most of us are very topical. We see someone, you and I see each other at the station, you and I see each other at lunch, and we're friendly. Does that mean you know exactly what I'm doing? Does that mean I know exactly what you're doing outside of work? The answer is no.
Absolutely. So when you look at everything that you've seen so far and heard so far, do you think either of the Clintons are in any real legal jeopardy?
I do not. I think that Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton have both been forthcoming and forthwith, and they've sold, I think, their story, at least to their satisfaction. And look, Jonathan, you and I both know, no matter what their testimony is, again, there'll be those that say, hey, that's the right testimony, they told the truth, they're fine. Others will say, not so much.
Yeah, so still somewhat political at the end of the day. Daryl, anything else we should be looking for? I got about 20 seconds as this proceeds.
No, I think it's going to play out the way it should, and we'll see how it does play out.
When it comes to dogs and cats, Georgia shelters are overwhelmed. More than 150,000 cats and dogs coming in every year. A Duluth-based nonprofit, though, just released a new report that focuses on some real doable solutions when it comes to making a difference here. That means reducing intake and saving lives. Let's dig into this. Joining now us is CJ Bentley, CEO of Planned Pethood of Georgia. CJ, good morning. Great to have you here on this Friday.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. An important topic here. I guess we start by, what are the root causes? Why do we have so many cats and dogs coming in and overwhelming shelters?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. The one that we focus on at Planned Parenthood, we focus on providing affordable veterinary care so that folks can afford to provide the care their pets need, along with low-cost spay-neuter services so that we can help reduce the unwanted pet overpopulation crisis. I think that a lot of times people make the maybe inappropriate assumption that everybody who takes their dog or cat to a shelter is doing so because they don't care or they're kind of jerks. That's not true. A lot of people have to take their pets to shelters because they cannot afford the appropriate care for them. And honestly, they love their pets so much. They want them to have the best chance at a happy life. So to them, they trust the shelters to rehome their pets, and that's where so many pets end up. If we can help work together to keep those pets in their homes in the first place, we can help reduce the overcrowding that we see at shelters.
Yeah, you also have seniors maybe moving into assisted living. We had to do this with a family member of my own, separate them from their cat. It was just heartbreaking. But when it comes to some of these other cases of maybe you have a dog and you get that bill that it's going to be $750 or that estimate to have your dog spayed. I remember when we got the estimate a few years ago for our puppy at the time. You're saying you actually have some affordable options, though. What do you mean by affordable?
Well, our affordable, that's a great question. Our affordable for if you wanted to have a cat spayed, our cost for that, no matter if it's a boy or girl, however old it is $105. Other places are so much more. Dogs, the price varies a little bit because it's a little more complicated if they're females, and it's a little more complicated if those females are larger, so the price fluctuates. But our highest cost for that type of surgery, we do not go over $300. There's not a spay surgery that we offer that's over $300. So to your own personal experience, that's a significant decrease in cost for people. And we have now 4 on-staff veterinarians who are very talented and skilled at being able to do that surgery because they do it all the time. So we provide a really great quality service for a hugely reduced cost.
That's just fantastic. Hats off to you all. It's so important, the work you're doing. How do you raise money?
Hopefully through stuff like this, Dan. So that is a fascinating question because, of course, in today's world, people are a little more hesitant to part with their money. So donations are down. We operate on a 70-30 model. So 70% of our revenue is generated for cost for service, but that extra 30%, so every time we offer a service, we take about a 30% loss on that service. And what's unfortunate is we have the same costs as all the other big box stores. In fact, we sometimes pay a little more because we do not get the benefit of group purchasing for our medications and drugs and stuff like that. So when we pay our doctors, we pay them a fair rate. We buy our medications, we pay the same as everybody else, but then we charge our customers so much less that how we make up that 30% is a huge challenge for us. We've got some wonderful donors. We've got some organizations that have come alongside us. Corporate sponsorships are incredibly valuable to us, but we spend a huge amount of our time trying to educate people on the importance of what we call going up the river, right? You can look at shelters, and I've been in shelters for almost my whole career, and they do a very valuable job to help animal welfare in our county. However, we can, if folks would focus with us up the river a little bit, we can stop that shelter crisis from happening in the first place. So it's really educating people to help them understand, please come alongside us, and then we won't have the terrible, sad stories that happen when too many animals go into our shelters.
CJ, the report is called 2026 Big Ideas for Georgia Animal Welfare. Anything else I'm missing that you want to make sure we get across today?
I really appreciate it. And I think one of the biggest things that came out of our white paper study is that people really care. In this community, people really care about animals. And if you're frustrated, if you want to help, please consider joining forces with a group that's already actively doing the good work instead of, I think oftentimes people get frustrated. They love animals and they think, I'm going to start my own rescue or I'm going to start doing, and that hurts us overall as a community because now we have another group fundraising. We have another group out there competing with different messages. So if you want to help, there are lots of great groups out there. Please contact them. They would love to have you. You can help in any way possible, but we've got to come together instead of being so segmented.
More than 100 million passengers a year roll through the world's busiest airport, our own Hartsfield-Jackson International, and roughly 12 to 15% of that traffic is international arrivals. This morning, travelers flying back into ATL could face longer lines at customs as slowdowns and enrollment pauses in the global entry program are creating new confusion. All right, let's look a little more at this with Christina Ernst, president of VIP Alpine Tours. All right, welcome back on the show. Explain what the Global Entry Program is and how it's different than TSA PreCheck.
Absolutely. So good morning. So first of all, we have the two different programs with the TSA, the Transportation Administrative Authority, and they screen passengers coming into the airport and flying. So making sure that we are safe, what we're carrying is safe. But where the issue lies is with the Customs Border Patrol, and that is they're monitoring who is coming into the United States and are we bringing in everything that we are supposed to, or, being safe about this. So with that being closed and global entry being shut down, we're seeing an issue with delays coming into the airport. And this weekend is the start of spring break. And that means over 171,000 people will be traveling all across the United States per day, and Atlanta alone sees 300,000 plus over the next 2 months. So we are expected to see delays. However, there's a lot of different options that we can do to alleviate some of this when we do head to the airports ourselves or arrive. So first of all, one of my recommendations is to definitely check the atl.com /times, which gives us the live times going through security checkpoints. And my TSA also has a really great app for that. It has this feature that you can check what is prohibited, what is not, to make it a little bit easier with traveling, and which security checkpoint might be the best for you to go through.
Now, do you think travelers?
No,
I was just going to say, do you think travelers should expect this to be resolved quickly or start planning for this? Because there is a huge difference from arriving with global entry and not having global entry. It's night and day.
It is. And one of my favorite apps is the MPC app, which is a backup that I use for global entry. But that's iffy as well. And I've had a lot of my travelers attempt to use that free app and did not have any success with that. So, yeah, we're really in for a lot of delays coming into the United States and with Atlanta. So that means your people picking you up, your transportation options, everything. We are already starting to see a delay coming into Atlanta, especially in the late afternoons into the early evenings. And a lot of those people are being backed up with connecting flights. So many of us here is our home, but so many of us are transporting or connecting through Atlanta to another arrival city. And so we definitely need to be prepared for this. Once we land in Atlanta, make sure all our documents are on hand, follow all the instructions, be ready to take that long walk down to F if you're coming in at E, and just that's quite a walk, and that's how I get my exercise. But it's definitely something that we need to be prepared for, and definitely keep an eye with the app, with the times. And my recommendation is tacking on an additional 30 minutes of wait time or check-in time in Atlanta, as well as a connecting time. So right now, 3 hours international, bump it up to 3.5 hours.
All right, that might hurt a little bit for the ones who like to push it. This is not the time for that.
There may finally be some relief in the housing market. For the first time in more than 3 years, the average 30-year fixed mortgage has dipped below 6%. The Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, better known as Freddie Mac, officially shows that rate at 5.98%. Rates were around 6.7%, you might remember, 1 year ago, meaning there have been some meaningful savings for buyers today. Meantime, refinancing applications jumped more than 30% week over week, signaling pent-up demand from homeowners who are waiting for some relief. Joining us now to talk about it is Andrew Leffler, operating partner at Method Real Estate Advisors based in Roswell. Great to have you on this morning. All right, so there's been a little bit of a drop. How significant is this, at least maybe psychologically, for buyers?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me here. The good news for buyers right now is even a 0.5% to a 1% change in interest rate can add 5 to 10% more affordability to the purchase on a property. So a lot of those folks who've been on the sidelines for the last 2 or 3 years are now saying, hey, maybe this is our year. We should really take shopping more seriously right now.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people have been waiting, as you mentioned, waiting for the right time. It's the springtime. Buying typically picks up around March, April. So what does this actually mean, let's say in dollars and cents, on a person's typical monthly payment?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different, right? So the best answer to that would be for you to talk to a mortgage lender and go through your finances before you make any kind of guesses on what that could be. For your typical buyer, depending on what they're putting down and depending on what the purchase price for the house is, what it really means is the difference between a person who's trying to purchase something that's at the high end of their budget may be able to now get something that they can more really comfortably afford. And so they're going to be much more likely to pull the trigger on a home that they've been looking at or thinking about purchasing for a while now.
Yeah, but prices are still pretty high in many cases. So are buyers really gaining meaningful purchasing power, or the home prices that we've seen still offsetting the benefit overall?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about real estate in general is you are buying an appreciating asset most of the time, right? There's no guarantee, of course, with anything, but there's never been a time where 10 years prior, a house would be cheaper to purchase than it would be if you purchase it today. So even though our home prices are higher than what we've seen historically, if you can afford to purchase a house now, it is usually a pretty good investment and it will actually end up creating wealth for you and your family. Are interest rates ultimately going to dictate whether people can or can't afford a house? Absolutely. It can be the difference from, hundreds of dollars a month. And that hundreds of dollars a month can definitely be the make or break scenario of whether a person can or cannot move forward with the purchase of a home. Renting is a 0% return on investment, right? You lose every single thing you put in from a rental perspective. So when you do purchase a home, you are putting money towards the principal and you're buying in long-term equity in that. That asset.
You know, my realtor recently said, he's like, you never can time out the market, so you never should try. So should buyers wait for maybe the rates to go even lower, or do you act now? What's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as timing the market. Time in the market is significantly more important in the real estate world than timing the market. There is only one really intelligent buyer right now, and that's the person who's working with a local agent who understands what affordability looks like. And that person is making a strategic decision to move forward when they can appropriately afford the property. A scenario that really wouldn't make sense is to wait for the market to crash. That's obviously not a great scenario for every other asset and every other aspect of your life. So it really doesn't benefit you to try to get a significantly better deal on a house because every other part of your day-to-day is going to be significantly.
Officially 100 days out from the FIFA World Cup. Look, you already know we got some big matches here in Atlanta, and it's going to be here before we know it, all at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Some of the teams coming to Atlanta include Cabo Verde, Uzbekistan, Haiti, Morocco, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and Spain. You know, Spain won the FIFA World Cup in 2010. And, just yesterday morning here on the show, about 24 hours ago, we brought you this moment live as Mayor Andre Dickens and Governor Brian Kemp rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange wearing some soccer scarves as ATL chant broke out on the floor of the exchange. It was very exciting. We are all looking forward to the FIFA World Cup 100 days away. So let's talk more about that right now with David Wright, the Chief Commercial Officer for the U.S. Soccer Federation. David, it's great having you on the show. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Man, 100 days out. How you feeling about things, and what can we expect as spectators here in Atlanta for the next 100 days?
You know, it's wild to think that it was over almost 8 years ago that U.S., Canada, and Mexico were awarded the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And so now fast forward, we're a mere 100 days out from what will be the largest sporting event in the history of sporting events of all time, and it's not even close. So we could not be more excited. If you're a fan of this great sport, I think you'll see a natural crescendo over the next couple of months, and we've got a host of activities that are going to really bring folks together. You know, things like our jersey launch. We're going to be announcing 2 new player-inspired jerseys with our great partners at Nike. We've got a roster reveal event in New York that will crown, you know, the players that make the roster. A lot of anticipation for that, and all the way through to Fan Fest with our great philanthropic arm, Soccer Forward Foundation, where we'll be inspiring the next generation of players to enjoy this great game. So it's an exciting time to be part of the sport of soccer in the U.S. right now.
You talk about inspiring the next generation of players. I just bought my 3.5-year-old some cleats and shin guards for the first time yesterday. He's starting some games this spring. I mean, tell me about what this could possibly do for the future of soccer fandom here in our country.
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of research that shows when you have a global event like a World Cup in a territory, the impact that has is off the charts. Right now, we've got about 130 fans of soccer in the U.S. We're projecting that number to grow north of 154 million, which is not insignificant. We know, and speaking of your 3-year-old, if you play the game of soccer, you're upwards of 6 times more likely to be a fan of the game when you grow up. So we talk about inspiring the next generation all the time, and what better way to do that than to have a global event like the World Cup on U.S. soil over the next number of months.
You know, David, I want to also talk about what this means for the legacy of Atlanta. You know, we still talk about the 96 Olympic Games here with such pride. What do you think we'll be saying about the World Cup 20 years from now? What do you hope we'll be saying about it?
Well, I would answer that 2 ways. I think one, from a macro perspective, there's no country in the world that is prepared to host an event like this, like the U.S. And from an infrastructure standpoint, from a fan base perspective, we're ready, and I think you'll see this continue to catapult the sport forward. As you think about Atlanta, I mean, Atlanta's a soccer town, and you know that will be on display with the 8 matches at Mercedes-Benz this summer. You know, we've got 4 matches leading up to the World Cup. In fact, 2 of which will be in Atlanta on March 28th against Belgium and March 31st against Portugal. By the way, both are sold out, and both will be very indicative of what fans can expect to see this summer. So the legacy is real. Soccer is here. We are a soccer nation, and Atlanta is helping to lead the way.
Millions of children in the U.S. grow up without a single book at home, even though access to books is one of the strongest predictors of reading success. Studies show up to 61% of low-income families have no books at home. That is a major barrier before a child even walks into kindergarten. The National Assessment of Educational Progress reports that here in Georgia, nearly 7 in 10 fourth graders are not reading proficiently, highlighting how urgent the literacy challenge is here at home. And by age 4, children in book-poor homes can hear up to 30 million fewer words than their peers, and that creates this huge vocabulary gap that can follow them for years. Now, a major new partnership with Reading is Fundamental is aiming to change all of those stats for the better by putting more books directly into kids' hands. Here to explain is Dr. Erin Bailey, Vice President of Literacy Programs and Research for Reading is Fundamental. So, Dr. Erin, when we talk about a literacy crisis, is that overstating it, or is it truly this urgent?
It is not overstating at all. I cannot emphasize enough how much of a crisis this is. As you mentioned in the statistics you were sharing, 70% of 8th graders across our country are not reading at grade level. And what does that mean? When they go into high school, they're more likely to drop out, they're more likely to not further their career, and they're not likely to be lifelong learners, because we know when you read, you continue to learn.
And so let's talk more about this partnership and, how it coincides with the predictors of not having books at home, really laying out the future for kids.
So, Reading is Fundamental. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. Since 1966, we have been putting books in the hands of children nationwide. And this year, Stauffer's Simply Animals is celebrating their 155th anniversary with the rebranding of Simply Animals coming out nationwide. And so they wrote this book, Bryson's Rocket Riddles. And when you buy this book during March, National Reading Month, 20% of the proceeds will go directly to Reading is Fundamental so that we can put more books in the hands of children nationwide.
And so for parents, how early should they start reading with their children?
You can start reading to your child before they are even born. That is the wonderful thing. The earlier, the better. Even when you are a pregnant mom, if you start reading to your child, they will get used to this voice. They will be more likely to recognize your voice and turn their head towards you when they're born because they're familiar with the sound of your voice. And then just start reading to them every single day. Create a reading routine with your newborn infant. If you do that, you are more likely to continue to read with them as they grow up.
And I just got to say, it just accelerates the vocabulary in a wild way, which is just so interesting to watch with me having a 5-year-old. But we do know that nearly 7 in 10 Georgia 4th graders, they're not reading proficiently. What does that mean long term for those students?
If you're not reading proficiently by 4th grade, you're less likely to catch up. There's still hope for you. There's always the wonderful teachers and families out there that can support a child to continue to learn how to read. But it's really those early years, preschool, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, those are very formative to what we call foundational reading skills. That once you acquire those, you're more likely to be able to read proficiently by the time that you get to 4th grade. So there's still hope for those 4th graders, but they will need to do a lot to catch up. And as you mentioned, vocabulary development. Start reading early so your child is exposed to a lot of different words and they're more likely to understand those words when they encounter them in books.
So let's talk solutions. If families don't have books at home, what options exist for them out there right now?
Right. We know, as you shared from research, that book ownership is key, having books present in the home. If you are not able to purchase books, I would highly recommend getting a library card and visiting your local library. In addition to that, there's now research that supports ebooks. If you treat an ebook, a child's ebook, the same way that you would treat a physical printed book, your child will still have those vocabulary gains, develop their comprehension, and even develop what we call concepts about print. Even though the book isn't printed, when you're reading an ebook, if you do things like point your fingers from left to right as you read, point out words, they're still going to be able to transfer those skills to a printed book.
We want to bring in the Social Circle city manager, Eric Taylor. You heard from him in Molly's piece, and he joins us now live. Eric, can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Thanks for making the time. Yeah, thanks for making the time. We appreciate you being here. Let's start with this because I know it's been a bit of a fluid situation. Where does the project and the government's plan to build this immigration detention center stand right now? Is it a done deal?
So it is a done deal as far as we know, in that the building has been purchased by the Department of Homeland Security. And I have had one conversation with individuals at Homeland Security, but basically just gave me a brief overview of the project, and that is the only conversation I've had with them. So I know that they are still moving ahead in the project, but I don't know what the current status is.
You get at something, you allude to it, but I want to ask it to you squarely. How much negotiation has occurred between the federal government and the city?
There's been no negotiations at all between the federal government and the city. They have not asked for our opinions. They have not consulted with us on any aspect about the project or what may be available in our city in terms of infrastructure.
And I know that you and others inside the city have opposed this plan. Why?
We just don't think it's the right fit for Social Circle. We're a friendly small town, and this is going to have significant impact on the quality of life around here. In particular with the water and sewer infrastructure, they're talking about coming in and pulling 1 million gallons a day of water and sewer for this site, and that's the size of our entire permit to pull to serve our entire city.
And Eric, anytime we talk about, anytime there is a discussion anywhere about immigration enforcement, ICE, the Department of Homeland Security, these are issues that have become very politicized in our current political climate. Is the city's opposition to the Immigration Detention Center, is it based on political beliefs, or is it purely an infrastructure concern from the city's perspective?
Our position on this has nothing to do with politics or what the current agenda is of the Trump administration. For us, it has been from day one all about maintaining the quality of life in this community and making sure that our infrastructure is safe and sound. We also have concerns about its proximity to a school, and we want to make sure that those safety issues are considered as part of this proposal as well.
Eric, I want to ask you a couple more questions here, but linger on this point for just a second longer. I'd imagine there are many people out there who are going to be listening to you and nodding along in agreement. I suspect there may be some other people listening to this conversation who may wonder what should be done in this situation. And they may ask, they may say that the government, in their view, does need somewhere to house immigration detainees. Why not in a place like Social Circle? What would you say to those folks who ask that question?
Why not in Social Circle? It's because we don't have the infrastructure to support it. Like I said, the sewer treatment plant that we have is only 660,000 gallons a day, and it's almost at capacity now. So how are you going to add another 1 million gallons to a 660,000 gallon sewer plant? I have no opinion about where they should be going. Only that I'm sure that there are other areas that are probably better suited for this. Some areas may be suited closer to the airport, for example. Where they have big warehouses down there. I don't understand why they chose this warehouse an hour and a half away from the airport.
Eric, one last question for you here. The Senator, Raphael Warnock, obviously visiting Social Circle yesterday. Right. He says he's filed an amendment to try to block this detention center from being built and the plan going through. What is your message to him, and what would be your message to federal authorities who have been pushing for this project?
Well, we appreciate all the efforts that Senator Warnock has put forth, and we hope that he's successful. Any help that we can get in trying to keep this from coming to our city is we're grateful for that.
The conflict involving Iran is now hitting Americans where it hurts. We're talking about at the gas pump. Prices here in the U.S. have already jumped in just the past few days, and experts say they could keep climbing if this conflict escalates. AAA says the price of a gallon of gas, unleaded here in Georgia, has jumped more than 30 cents just in the past 2 days. You probably have noticed the current mark of $3.12 is 45 cents more than it was this time just 1 month ago. Let's look at how much higher these prices could go with Montre Waiters from AAA. Good to have you on this morning, Montre. So let's start for this. For drivers who may not follow oil markets very closely, why does the conflict, which is thousands of miles away, affect the price that we're going to pay here at the pump in the U.S.?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. Well, here's the deal. So currently we talked about what the gas prices are, right? So Iran plays a major role in the world's oil supply. So any attack on its oil facilities is going to matter globally. And, we've been talking about the Straits of Hormuz as well. With tankers being rerouted, that strait is a key route for Middle Eastern oil. So if blocked, of course, it would affect oil prices worldwide. So, even in countries that don't depend heavily in the region on oil, like the USA coming from Iran, because we get ours from Canada and Mexico, this will still impact the region globally. So This is one reason why we're seeing gas prices increase. And of course, when the crude oil increased because of what's happening over globally, when the crude oil increased, that's also going to increase gas prices here at home.
Yeah, we're seeing this happen pretty quickly. I'm curious, so do gas stations, at least some of them, have existing fuel inventories that perhaps may buffer the increases, or does the impact really show up right away?
It can buffer the increases, but the impact, as you can see over the last few days, has caused gas prices to rise quickly overnight. Here in Georgia, overnight we went up, popped up 11 cents, right? So again, this is what I want people to keep in mind too, though. Even though we're going through this and we do see gas prices increasing, the United States has a plenty supply of gas here. So it's not an issue of people panicking or thinking we're going to run out of gas. At this point, it's about how do we save gas.
Yeah, that's the question. That's all right. So I know Georgia, we've typically had lower gas prices when you compare it to the national average. Some of my friends in other cities, they're feeling it far worse. Why is it that we typically see lower prices in Georgia, even during these spikes?
Well, that also depends on, it's not just Georgia, there could be other states. There are other states that have lower gas prices. You have to think about what goes into what we pay at the pump, right? So locally, you got to look at local gas taxes, state gas taxes, the demand. If it's a heavier demand, like in metro areas, which is usually why we see Atlanta costing a little more maybe than someone who lives out in Lawrenceville. So those are the factors that play into what we pay at the pump.
As we mentioned earlier, we could see the prices go even higher. What should we be watching for in the coming days to know whether or not that might happen?
So, again, how long the gas prices will keep going on, it just depends on how long this conflict goes on. And we can't predict how far the gas prices will go up or how long it will last. Again, it's all about giving great money saving tips. We hope that we don't reach, the last time we saw prices start to spike like this was during the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2020. Our prices here in Georgia alone got up to $4.06 a gallon. We're not there yet. We hope it doesn't get to that point. And again, it just depends on how long the conflict is. But unfortunately, we can't tell you, we don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, to say.
Hey, Montreal, I've got about 20 seconds here. Do Americans typically change their driving habits when we see these prices spike, or do people just absorb the costs?
Yeah, we try to change. That's what we recommend, is that they do change their driving habits. So think about planning your route prior to leaving so that you can save on gas, enroll in fuel saving rewards, as well as look at gas apps. AAA has a fuel gas app as well to see what the gas prices are in your local area. Make the best decision for you and your family.
Reigniting the debate when it comes to parental responsibility and gun storage. Joining us now is Abby Clements, a survivor of the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting and a co-founder of Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence. Abby, I appreciate you being here. Really looking forward to your perspective on things. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. As a Sandy Hook survivor and as an educator yourself, how does that verdict feel to you yesterday? Guilty on all counts.
Well, first of all, my heart breaks for the entire community there, for the school district and the entire wider community, the victims, the survivors, and of course the educators and the school staff, because folks are forever changed when something like this impacts a system. And it brings back sort of thinking about what happened at the tragedy at Sandy Hook, and I think the frustration and outrage that this continues to happen over and over. I mean, if there's one thing a parent who's listening right now, I hope that what they take from this is that you have a responsibility to lock up your firearms. You can prevent the next school shooting.
It does continue to happen over and over again, and it's sickening to watch. Do you think that this was the logical next step as a nation that can't seem to come to grips on this crisis to go after the parents? I mean, do you think that's what we should be doing from here on out?
I absolutely do think. I mean, this is starting to happen, right? We're seeing the link between parents who are leaving their firearms accessible to children, and seeing that this irresponsibility has tremendous consequences. The school can't do this alone regarding warning signs. We have to be all on the same page. And if you choose to have a firearm in your home, simply lock it up. Half of firearm owners have at least one unlocked loaded gun in their home. I mean, we have in terms of how to protect our children, and it starts at the home.
And in this particular home, the father now likely, we'll wait on sentencing, but very possible that he's going to be locked away for the rest of his life. He's facing, more than 200 years if convicted on all counts, and indeed he was. Do you think that's a loud and clear enough message for parents nationwide to do something if they see those red flags in their child?
I absolutely do. I mean, this story is particularly tragic because of the level of the warning signs, the obsessiveness with other mass shootings, and not only the availability of a lethal firearm, but the gift of it and where it was located. So to me, the message is clear. If we are going to make an effort, the effort that we must have as a society to change the statistic that guns are the leading cause of death for children, it has to start with this culture change. And it's as simple as locking up your firearms and keeping it inaccessible. And now the message is quite clear. This is not just a one-off. This is happening, here and there, that you can be held responsible if you don't lock up your firearm.
And when it comes to locking up the firearm, what do you want parents out there to know when it comes to safe storage?
I mean, I think, first of all, I think as a society, when we start normalizing secure storage, right? You take your child to the pediatrician talks about secure storage. When you go to the library, they'll have information. We hope someday when you purchase a firearm, wherever you get that from, there will be information about how you can prevent the next shooting, the next suicide by gun, the next unintentional shooting of a child, of a young child. We see this happen over and over again. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity as a nation to simply normalize the practice of secure storage. I mean, there are a variety of ways that you can lock up your firearm, from what researchers say is the most effective way and to be the surest that you can in terms of locking it up separately, the ammunition and the firearms separately. I mean, but if at least there's some way that you're locking it up, I think it's that it becomes what a firearm owner knows is expected.
Abby, my final question for you. During this trial, we saw victims of the shooting take the stand, students who survived, teachers who were there at the time, and you could tell how much this has changed their life. From somebody who has been through this themselves, at Sandy Hook, losing 6 of your colleagues, 20 innocent first graders. What do you want the survivors of the Appalachia High School to know when it comes to dealing with grief and trauma all these years later?
Thank you for this question. I want them to know that they're not alone. Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence, we have a crisis intervention and support team. We are here for you. We want every educator who has the fear and the impact of gun violence to know there is a team of folks who get it. We know we are educators who have been through it, and you are not alone. And it's okay to reach out to help, especially from people who get it. For us, many of us who experienced the tragedy at our school, we had the support from Columbine teachers who came to see us. And that connection is invaluable to be able to talk to somebody who understands the challenges of the aftermath moving forward. I also want to say that healing is not linear, and that certainly what's going on right now in this conviction and what's coming ahead, it's going to very possibly activate folks. It's difficult to talk to your peers about. Everybody's trying to do their jobs. They're trying to move forward. They're trying to keep teaching, taking care of their own families. So I would like to say that give yourself some grace, especially during this, intense news time. And it doesn't look like you're going to get much of a break from it. But please feel free to reach out to us at teachersunified.org.